Disclaimer: the footage in this video is captured from a pre-release version of Street Fighter 6. Please keep that in mind, as with pre-release builds, things are always subject to change and may not be exactly the same on final release. A huge thank you to Capcom UK for inviting us to London for this capture session, and we really hope you enjoy today's video. Fighting games are mostly seen as a multiplayer experience for many players, whether it was the arcade days of walking up and putting some money in the machine, or with the console generation of just getting some mates round and playing some kind of winner stays on thing with whatever fighting game you had at the time, to now, where the competitive space is bigger than ever, with ranked matches, leaderboards, and of course most prominently, offline major events where hundreds, sometimes thousands of players will gather somewhere to find out who is the best of the bunch. Now, single-player content is something that's always been around in the genre, but rarely explored. I think the most common example of single-player fighting game content tends to lie in Mortal Kombat, as the 3D age had its various conquest modes that went down extremely well, and the NRS era has full cinematic experiences, even with rotating single-player towers that will change throughout the day or month. Tekken had Tekken Force and various other modes that people can enjoy without having to rely on other players. But in the entire genre, this idea of playing the game entirely on your own isn't always seen as the most engaging of ways to play. I have to give credit that most of the time, with any fighting game, there is often at least something, maybe some kind of story mode in some form. But it always does boil down to fighting the AI, and that's that. The question is always, what can be done to make the single-player experience more engaging, and dare I say, even bring the player up to speed on the game's mechanics and features to make somebody ready for PvP should they feel finally up for the challenge. This is where Street Fighter 6 comes into the fray. With a limited amount of capture time in the new World Tour mode, it became extremely obvious very quickly that this is not just some bonus mode that you'll play for a few hours and forget about. It is a fully fleshed out experience designed towards teaching players of any skill level how to play Street Fighter in a way that's fun, exciting, and generally a good laugh. Has Street Fighter 6 innovated the single player experience though? Well, let's dive in and find out. If anybody here has played the demo for Street Fighter 6, you will already know what the basics of World Tour involve, but let me give you a quick rundown just in case there are those unaware. World Tour mode focuses on your journey. You create a custom character, doing so in a creator that sports vast options, so you can make your avatar as cursed as you wish. What's cool here though is that the changing proportions of your character will actually have an impact on the size of your attack hitboxes, but also your hurtbox, where opponents are able to attack you a bit easier, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Once you're set up and you're good to go, World Tour begins, and essentially, this mode is like an open world in the vast metro city. You have a bunch of missions to complete for progression, you can interact with various characters. Often the main missions will focus on you being guided by one of the playable characters in the game, and in the build that we played, it begins with Luke, something you would have experienced in the demo, and then you also get to interact with Chun-Li. This is important because not only are you able to interact with these characters, but you can train with them and learn their fighting styles that you can use yourself in World Tour. There's a decent amount of progression here. You level up as you push forward. You can actually challenge most of the city's residents to a fight where defeating them grants XP, but also you have certain challenges in those fights where you might be able to get some items for either gameplay or customization. And as you level up, you are able to enhance what are essentially skill trees to power up certain elements of your gameplay. You can get more damage from certain moves, you can take less damage overall, you can even increase the amount of special move slots that you have, and this is where the customization gets very interesting. As you train under certain characters in World Tour, you will level up your style and the bond you have with that character. Leveling this up allows you to eventually learn more special moves that the original character has, and the exciting thing about World Tour is that you can actually combine these specials into one place. As a quick example, we were able to use both Chun-Li's Fireball and Luke's Shoulder Tackle in the same character. But let's not forget that it also lets you keep the basic normals and combos that the base character that you've chosen provides. I'm actually really interested in what potential speedruns could look like for World Tour, because you already know there's going to be ideal, almost loadouts for getting through matches quickly, so that discovery period, I think, will be a lot of fun. Basically, World Tour is all about your experience. Customization to almost your heart's content, but getting an idea over what characters you like to play, and even then, what specials that you like as well, as when everything's combined and you've played it enough, you'll know at that point what you like the most, which, who knows, maybe that will help you find a main should you jump into the standard game, right? Exploration is key in Metro City. In the world, you have the ability to start fights with the citizens using a special move. This will help you deal some damage before the match has even begun, and in fights where you have to take on more than one opponent at the same time, it helps give you that bit extra of a fighting chance. Not that I felt particularly challenged by any of these fights. The early game is extremely easy, so simple jump-ins into even target combos can be enough to rinse and repeat. I do imagine this might get a bit more challenging down the line though. The special moves in the overworld are used for more than just setting up matches. You can destroy a hefty amount of the map to clear obstacles and open up secret paths to where treasure may lie. Currency for purchasing items in the game, sometimes other stuff. It's generally rewarding to explore the map because you can find stuff that helps you out in some way. Even using the spinning bird kick to fly from one platform to another is incredibly satisfying. This is something I want to touch on though, because no matter the controller you're using, you can still play World Tour and do everything you need to do. I use a fight stick in Street Fighter, and I have done for many years, and my first concern was, with controlling the camera and everything else, isn't this going to be a controller-focused mode? Well, apparently not, as there's all kinds of built-in shortcuts that a player can use to control the camera and use all necessary tools to do everything that World Tour offers. Supposedly, this was a clear focus from the team, as Street Fighter is a game that often has different controllers for different players. Remember, it's all about personal preference. So I have to give Capcom props for thinking ahead when it comes to controls. The gameplay in this video was entirely captured using a fight stick. One of the major talking points I want to bring up in today's video is that World Tour does an interesting job at teaching the player how to play Street Fighter in a subtle way that builds you up as you go along. It almost feels like they've taken the approach of let's make teaching fun, and honestly, I can see this working quite well for the general player base, although of course, only time will tell. The game itself, where you jump into matches and fight various AI-controlled characters, is one thing. I said at the very beginning of this video that it is quite common that no matter what the single-player mode is, this is what it generally boils down to, and in some ways, the base game of World Tour does the very same thing. But this is where the teaching idea expands, as Metro City has a number of different mini-games that seem like just a bit of fun at first glance, but they actually serve a purpose to teach a player important fundamentals at the same time, and you won't even realize you're learning while you play. These mini-games are plentiful, a great time to play, and rewards players with currency to use in Metro City. However, I want to talk about each of the minigames that we played in this build and explain what lessons are being taught behind the scenes. Each minigame seemingly has different difficulty levels where the execution becomes a bit more precise every time. The first encounter I expect many players to have is the board-breaking minigame. This is right behind Chun-Li, so it's pretty hard to miss. But what does the board breaking actually involve? I guess immediately the name does kind of answer that question. However, there are people holding wooden boards on each side of the screen, and you have to break enough of them in the time limit to pass. The harder difficulty we unlocked expanded on this a bit by having people hold stone boards that take more punishment to destroy, as well as punishing the player for accidentally hitting one of the people holding them. As if you do that, these people will straight up throw the board at you and it loses time. It knocks you on the floor, you see, but where's the lesson here? The boards are specifically placed at various parts of the screen, teaching the player how to hit certain targets that aren't just on the ground directly in front of you. A board in the top corner teaches the importance of jump normals pressed at the right time. It's almost as if an opponent is at the apex of a neutral jump, right? Some of the boards are placed low to the bottom corner, teaching you the importance of a low attack, as it is possible to accidentally break a board and hit the carrier at the same time, which you don't want. The harder boards force players to use stronger attacks and hit the same area more than once, again teaching the player about precise button placement. Now, we only got to the second difficulty here, so it's unsure what the harder ones involve, but I do imagine there's even more challenging boards that require even more precise normals to connect with. The second one we found was the most simple. It is the famous car-crushing minigame from the classics. It's the easiest one, at least on the easy mode for us, but you need to use stronger attacks to break the truck a lot faster. The lesson here is understanding what your most powerful and damaging moves are, and using them correctly to destroy the vehicle in the time provided. Sadly, we can't really elaborate on this too much, as we did only have the first difficulty. But it's clear straight away that the player knowing what their strongest moves are is the lesson in this one. The final minigame we found was a pizza making challenge. I think this one might actually become a fan favourite because beyond the humorous tones of please interrupt your journey with us real quick to become a world-class fighter and make these pizzas for us, this is a lesson in precise execution. The game mode has a set amount of input sequences that you have to follow perfectly and get enough of them completed in the time limit. These aren't just any old inputs though, they are often inputs that a player will need to learn in the game itself. The easy difficulty often just has a simple direction and button follow-up, but even a down and medium kick is actually a normal that's important for almost everyone in the game. The harder difficulty we unlocked was a bit more creative with this, because the inputs you had to perform were inputs for a fireball, or a dragon punch, stuff like quarter circle forward, forward down, down forward punch. The later inputs at the end of this would be super inputs, like double quarter circle, and the higher difficulty still has a strict time limit, and that forces you to be fast and efficient with these inputs, but all the while you're learning how to do a double quarter circle consistently just to beat the pizza minigame. You're learning how to do these motions for when the game requires it later during matches. It's a wonderful idea, honestly, and it embodies the strongest tone of making a fun learning experience, almost masking the process behind a fun little extra minigame that most players are just doing for in-game progression. I can't say for sure about other minigames and the like because, again, we did only have a limited time to capture this game mode. We didn't even get to scratch the surface of how much the player has to do in World Tour, but if it's like anything we've seen so far, it is incredibly promising. Ultimately, World Tour mode seems like something that can be experienced and enjoyed without having to even try the main component of the game, which is of course the actual fighting game itself. But in playing this mode and progressing your character, finding out which moves you like, improving your inputs and execution thanks to getting much better at the minigames, there is an entire teaching tool at play that the user might not even realize is there, but they may do when the time comes to play in harder difficulty AI matches in the mode itself, or even if they choose to take their custom creation to the world of online play with their friends. I suppose my closing thoughts in this video is that World Tour is doing something I personally have never experienced before. And that's saying a lot because I've played a ton of different fighting games over the years, and being no stranger to cool single-player modes as a Mortal Kombat fan, you do always sit and think with each new fighting game that can something be done to give the single-player fan a lasting experience that might even help them become more confident in the multiplayer portion someday. We all have friends, myself included, that really want to play new fighting games but seem to be unable to justify picking them up, because once they've done a few bits here and there, their drive to grind the 1v1 element and become really good at it isn't enough motivation to either keep playing or start playing at all. You have to remember, not everybody gets a new game to grind leaderboards or ranked matches. Not every game is bought because people want to dedicate a bunch of time to getting really good. And that's where World Tour seems to lie. There is no push here to make a player feel like they have to someday start playing against human opponents. You can by all means play Street Fighter 6 just for this mode and supposedly get your fair share of enjoyment. The open world nature, the customization. It can be just an adventure game if that's what you're looking for, but everything in Metro City is geared towards, at the very least, making you a better Street Fighter player, even if you do not realize it. And that is our current thoughts on World Tour. I want to extend another thank you to Capcom UK for inviting Mustard and myself to capture a session. And if you want to see more of what's coming in Street Fighter 6, we've been able to capture some of the main game as well. So stay tuned, and if a video has already been released on this channel, I'll put it in the description. If not, there is stuff to come. We have a bit of a list to work on here. Stay tuned, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Take care, goodbye.